Hi everyone, welcome to the tutorial walkthrough for Chapter 9 in our GIS textbook, Mastering ArcGIS Pro. It's the first edition. I am Cynthia Hartley, and I am using on my computer the software version of ArcGIS Pro 2.6.1. And I just want to point that out because the textbook was written for a slightly older version. It's textbook's a couple years old. And you also might have a different version than I have on your computer. It shouldn't make a big difference, but there will be slight variations in what you see on your screen and what you see on my screen. And certainly we know that there's differences in the textbook based on the newer versions of ArcGIS Pro. Now, this shouldn't cause a lot of problems. Usually when the software is updated, it becomes more efficient and more intuitive. So what happens is sometimes there might be something in a drop-down menu in the book, but instead it's a button on the screen that we're looking for. Things might be named slightly different. So for the most part, it should be pretty easy to figure out, and I'll point it out as we go. Before we get going, I do want to mention the screen. I'm going to use this at the end of each section. It's a reminder that you can pause the video and go back and rework some of the steps. As we're doing this, don't feel like you have to follow me as we're going. It's easier for you to learn this by just sitting back and watching it and trying to understand as I'm doing it. That's a great way to go. Or if it's better for you, you can click as you go and pause. But I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to take a breather, understand what step they're on in the textbook, and have a chance to walk through the steps. So let's get started with Chapter 9, Queries. So we start by opening up our folder provided by the text. So go to probably your C drive where you have it stored, open the GIS class folder, and we'll be opening class projects this time. And we want the United States folder. And when you're in that, open up the United States project file. Okay, once you have your project open, we are going to explore the select tool, and we're going to do that in Texas. So go to your bookmarks in the map tab. So click on bookmarks and open the Texas bookmark. So take a look up here in your map tab. You want to go into the selection group, and we're going to start by activating our select tool. And we're going to look at these a little bit later. There's a number of different types of ways you can draw your selection. But for right now, we're just going to stick with the rectangle tool. So come down here to this star. This is Austin. And if we click on this star, it's highlighted. It's turned the cyan color. And by now, you've probably encountered this tool. You would know if you open up the attribute table of cities that this particular record for Austin would be highlighted. We can highlight other things. Here's an interstate near there. If I click on that, the length of this that's represented in the attribute table, that's highlighted. Clicking on another interstate, this is highlighted, and then a river. I've clicked on that and selected it. Now that's highlighted. So let's click on a county. Now you would expect that one of these little county outlines would be selected, but instead this time we have the entire state of Texas is selected. So the reason for that is we've got two polygon layers on top of each other. And if you look over here in the contents pane, you can see states is above counties. And in this case, the default setting goes to the states. So that's going to get selected when there's two overlapping layers. And what we're going to do is look at this in the contents pane in a different way. So go up here to the top of the contents pane where you see all of these icons. You're going to click on this one, List by Selection. So this gives us a list of all the layers in the table. There's all check marks next to them. What that means is they are selectable. And you can see here that we have the state of Texas selected, and there's a number 1 here showing that we have one feature selected in this layer. Now, if we change the order of this, click and drag counties above states. Now let's go back and click on our county. Now this one takes priority. 2 polygons on top of each other, counties is above, so that indicates when we click on it that that is what's going to be selected. Note also that the state of Texas isn't selected, and we don't see it either because it's now underneath this counties layer. So next, let's draw a rectangle around Austin. So a whole bunch of things were selected. That's because our box overlapped all of these different features. And a corresponding list of attributes that are selected over here in the contents page. So let's clear that and do something else. So as you note, there's a checkbox next to each of these layers. That means that any of the features in these layers is selectable. And we can turn these off and on. So hold down your control key and click one of these boxes. And what that does is that makes all of these layers not selectable. So we're going to turn counties on. And now when we go back and we draw our little box around Austin, only counties has been selected. All of these other layers have been turned off. So let's turn all of our layers back on again to be selected. So I'm going to hit Control, my control key, and I'm checked in one of these boxes. Turn them all back on. So if I go up here to this city and draw a rectangle around it, now we have, oh, this is up in Oklahoma. Now we have all of these other layers selected, and we can pick to clear any one of these all at once or individually. To do this individually, this is one way. I'm going to clear counties. So I'm going to right click on counties. I'm going to go down to selection. And then all the way down here to clear selection. And that just cleared these counties. An easier way to do it is to come up here to clear. If I click this, it'll clear them all at once. Okay, so we're done with Texas for now. Let's go and look at another way we can select things. So let's switch, go up to your bookmarks icon, and now we're going to go to Michigan. And next we're going to get out of this. But before we get out of this, we're going to make a little change over here. We just want counties to be the selectable layer. So again, I'm just going to, you could go through here and click on all of these, but I'm going to hit Control and I'm going to check one of these. And then I'm going to turn back on counties. And we're going to get out of this view. We're going to go back to the list by drawing order. And we want to switch this around so our states are on top. Now remember, we just made county selectable, so states are not going to take precedence if we click on any of the counties. We're also going to turn off interstates. So we're only looking at counties now. And I'm going to select one county just here in the middle of Michigan. I'm clicking on it, not drawing a rectangle. And now say I want to select counties that maybe aren't connected to this that I can't get by drawing a rectangle. I'm going to hold the Shift key and click wherever I want to select a county. So this allows me to have multiple things selected that aren't contiguous, aren't right next to each other. Now say I want to get rid of one of these. Instead of using the Shift key to add, I'm going to click the Control key again. And when I click on any of my selected counties, they are no longer selected. Okay, so I will clear the selection. Let's get rid of this. Now let's try to select all of the states here in Upper Michigan. And let's do it by drawing a rectangle as closely as we can. Now it's kind of a funny shape. So to get all of the counties, we have to draw our rectangle a little big. Right, so now I've got this big selection, but we know that we can do Control click and clean this up. So now I've gone back and I've selected the counties that I wanted. Okay, so that is the default setting. So everyone's software should select in this manner, but we can control this, we can change it. And the way we do that, again, come up to Map, Selection Group, and we're going to click on this button right here. So in any of these groups in the ribbon, if there are more options that aren't visible from the ribbon, this little option tool is available. So I'm going to click on this, and this window pops up. And here's our default, create a new selection. So now whenever we click on anything with our select tool, anything we click makes a brand new selection. So if we move our cursor and click somewhere else, the old selection goes away, and whatever we clicked on becomes a new selection. So I'm going to change this. Let's pick the second one, add to the current selection. So that anything that's been selected is not going to go away. We're going to add to it. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to OK out of here. Now, if I click anywhere in Southern Michigan, this doesn't go away. Northern Michigan states that I've selected, they are just added to it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to draw a rectangle now, because I want to select all of the counties in Michigan. Okay, so now let's change our default so we can remove these. So I went back and I opened up that extra options. Now we're going to take the next one down. Remove from current selection. And accept that, okay out of there. Now when I click on these, anything I click on is removed from the selection. So I'm clicking on these other ones, and because they're not already in the selection, nothing's happening. So let's get rid of all of the Southern Michigan state or counties. Okay, so let's explore that last option. So going back to select options, we're going to try select from current selection. And draw a box that encompasses both Northern and Southern Michigan. So my box that I drew touched these counties up here. And so those were selected. The ones that my rectangle box didn't touch were deselected. So that is the different defaults that we can choose. Let's go back and reset this to the regular default, create new selection. And now we can explore some of these other tools. These are all just different ways of making selections. They're not a lot different. Typically we do go with just rectangle, but let's play around. Let's look at circle, because this is kind of a neat one. So again, let's see, my icon's changed from a rectangle to a circle next to my arrow. I click on this city. I've selected the county that's underneath it. Now I can click and hold, and it draws a circle. And the more I pull, the bigger the circle gets. And now it'll select all those counties that are underneath this. Okay, I'm going to clear the selection. We'll do something else with the circle. So another cool thing you can do with this circle selection is you can specify exactly how big you want your circle, your radius to be. So I'm going to click and drag and make a circle. And while I'm still holding down my mouse key, I'm going to press R on the keyboard. So I just let go of my mouse and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to specify 100 miles. So I'm typing 100 into here. I'm going to change the default feet to miles. And there, it made my circle 100 miles. And if we hit return or enter, we get all of the counties selected that were touching that circle. So let's look at just one more tool. I'm going to clear this and let's select all of the counties of Michigan. This is a pretty irregularly shaped state. So we're going to look at a different one. Let's do polygon. So I'm going to select polygon, and this allows us to draw kind of a free form polygon. So I'm just clicking around the state, being sure to capture all of these counties. Looks like that will do it. So I'm going to double click to select everything. And there we go. I've selected all of the counties in Michigan. So now is a good time to pause. We reached the end of the first section. So our next section is selecting by attributes, and this is steps 13 through 20 on the tutorial instructions. Okay, so here we are back on our map. This is Michigan where we left off. We're going to change now, and we're going to follow our bookmark for USA. We're going to look at the whole country. And now let's turn on cities. We're going to be doing some queries on cities. Now we're going to be moving down the line, and we were playing with the interactive select tool. Now we're going to do select by attributes. It's the next tool in a row here. And we could access the tool from the toolbar, but there's another way to do it, and that's what we're going to do. I'm going to be, want to look at the toolbar, the geoprocessing tools. So I'm clicking on our little toolbox, and I'm going to do a search on this. Select layer by attributes. That's the one we want. So I've opened up our tool, and the first thing we want to do is use this query tool to select all of the cities that had a population of greater than 1 million in the year 2014. So I've got cities highlighted, and had we done this the other way and opened the tool through the select by attributes in the toolbar, that would have automatically populated the input roles. But because we're doing it this other way, it's slightly different. So let's enter that. We're looking at cities, and we want selection type is new selection. I'm going to click on this expression, and I know all of you have done this many times by now, so this should feel quite familiar. So we're going to do 2014 as our where, and greater than, then I'm going to type in 1 million. So this is a little wizard that builds our SQL phrases or SQL code for us. So it's a pretty handy thing. You can check your queries, and when we're building simple queries like this, they always work because the wizard does a good job. So we look good, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this. So it's hard to tell, but we do have a couple scattered cities that were over 1 million in 2014. You can get the actual number by looking down here on select features. It tells us there are 9. Another way to do this, which you all should be familiar with by now, right-clicking on cities. I'm going to open up this attribute table, and it does indeed tell me out of a little less than 4,000 cities, 9 were selected. And if I mouse over here, we can look at the actual, just the selected records. So I'm going to click on that, and here are our 9 cities that were over 1 million. Okay, so I'm going to close this. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to build a somewhat more complex query onto this. I want to clear all of these, this selections and the query phrase. So I'm going to click back. It takes me back to the geoprocessing pane with all the tools. I'm going to reopen the tool, and that clears out what was in here already. Now, do not clear your selection that was already there. Actually, let's go back to the map pane. Just switch the toolbar back to maps. We're not going to clear, do not clear your selection. We're going to build another one. So this time we want to look and find which are the states that also had over 5 million. So let's change this to states. And we're going to build an expression. So we're looking at that same year, 2014 is greater than. I'm going to type in 5 million. Verify the code. It looks good. Run. So take a look at this. We have cities that are selected. This was our old query, in addition to the new states that meet that criteria. So cities over 1 million, states over 5 million. Now, this is different than when we use the interactive tool, this select by polygon. The default on this is if we make a new selection, it clears the old one and it just resets it, and whatever the new selection is, that's the only thing that's going to come back. So when we use this tool, the select by attributes tool, the default is different. It's going to add to that expression. Okay, so now we're going to build a little more complicated query. We're moving on to step 15. Let's clear this old query. We're going to do clear. Now that's all gone. Now what we want to do is we want to look for all the counties that went down in population between 2014 and 10, and also the ones that have more males than females. So we're going to see cleared, and now we're going to clear our tool. We're going to start fresh, double click the tool again. And now, again, we want to make sure this is a new selection, and we're looking at counties this time. So let's build an expression. So we're going to do the first one. We want the ones who went down in population. So in 2014, their less is less than. And this is a little confusing because you drop down this and you get all these numbers, but go all the way down to the bottom and you want to change this toggle. So instead of values, we want fields. And we come back here, now it's switched and we can select population in 2010. So now we're not done. We want to now find out the ones that had more males than females. So I'm going to do an add clause. Now we want males. We're leaving this as and. We want males all the way down, a greater than. And again, we get a bunch of numbers, but we want to switch this to fields. So change from values to fields. Females. So let's verify, and our expression is good. So we hit run. And here we go. So now let's build on this and let's make this an even somewhat more complex query. From this selection, we want to find the counties that had less than 10,000 people. So we're going to leave all of this the same here, but what we want to change is selection type. So we're going to change this to select subset from current selection. So I'm going to click on this, and I just want to put it out there that pay attention to this, because more than likely this is going to be on the exercise homework. You're going to be building queries like this. So we're keeping our selection. I'm going to clear out our old queries. Now, any new query we build it's going to look at the selection. It's only going to look at those records, and it's going to pull out whatever meets my query criteria. So now let's build one. So add clause. Population in 2014 is less than, we're going to type in 10,000. Verify the code, it's good, run. So now we have a subset. We went down from 300 and something to 133. All right, let's look at another kind of query. We are moving on. This is now step 17. Let's clear our old query. And there are a lot of cities that have, in some way or another, have Springfield in the name. And let's see how many cities that is. So I've cleared my selection. We're going to clear out our tool. So I'm going to hit the back arrow, reselect it, and open it. Now it's clear again. So we want to make sure this is new selection. We cleared it, so it did reset to the default. This will mess you up big time if you accidentally have this on the wrong thing. So I'm sure someone's going to have a problem at some point. So be aware of this. Keep an eye, make sure it's pulling out the right kind of expression that you're looking for. Okay, so we're going to go back to cities. We want to find cities that have Springfield in the name. So new expression name is equal to, and it gives us all the different options here. I'm just going to type it in until it shows up, if I can type it correctly. There's Springfield. Springfield. So verify that's good, and we're going to run it. And not as many as I expected. It looks like we've got seven cities that have the name Springfield in it. So I mentioned a little bit about this. We are building a SQL query, and we have this very handy dandy wizard that saves us a lot of heartache of building these SQL tools. Let's look at what this actually the coding is. So this is, if we were going to build this code from scratch, and it's actually a very powerful way to build queries, this is the correct syntax. If it's not correct, it'll kick you out and won't give you anything back. Let's just by hand change this to Las Vegas. So be careful to make sure Las and Vegas are capitalized. I'm going to rerun this query. I didn't realize it, but there's a Las Vegas in New Mexico. So we have two features with the name Las Vegas. All right, let's look at another way we can do a query. And let's go back to the builder. And this time, let's look for any city that has the name city in it. So name is correct. Let's see. We want to do contains the text. And we're just going to type in city. Make sure you capitalize city. Verify our expression is valid. And here we go. We have a whole bunch of cities that have the name city in there. Now, this is a way we can verify the SQL code. So we're going to go into SQL. And if we just type, change this to lowercase city. So you know what's going to happen. It's giving me this error that the SQL expression is valid, but no records have returned. Turn that off. And you can see it changed it in this box. So really what it's doing is it's taking these things that you're entering into these boxes and it's inserting it into the code. So this is sensitive to capitalization. You have to make sure that you type everything in correctly. Otherwise, you're going to come back with nothing and you're not going to understand why. So again, kind of a heads up on the homework. This is something you're going to want to keep in mind as you're doing your exercise homework. So just to utterly convince you, I'm going to switch city back to the correct spelling, the correct capitalization. And let's just open up this attribute table. So as you can see, actually let's show the selected rows. It is indeed everything that has the name city in the city name. Okay, so I'm going to clear this selection. And we're going to open the make feature layer tool. So this tool has a query, the ability to make queries built into it. Make feature layer. So this is going to allow us to build a query into our export. So we're going to export a layer with certain selections with a query and selected fields. So this is very powerful. This saves a lot of time and a lot of effort. So the example we're going to do is we're exporting a report, or we're going to create a report on minority populations in the New England area. So let's enter in states, since these are grouped by area. So the output is going to be New England states. And we do want to pick just New England states. So subregion is equal to New England. Now, there's a lot of records in here, lots and lots. It's very overwhelming. We only want to select a subset of these. So we want to uncheck all of these and then just check the ones we want. And the way to do that, I hit shift, and then I'm going to click on the first one, and then I'm just going to go all the way down the bottom, and still holding the shift in, I'm going to click on this one. So everything is now selected. And I'm just going to check these. So it automatically unselects everything, so I don't have to go through and check every single one. And the ones that we do want to bring across when we export this into a new feature class is going to be state name, population, and then white and black. Number of white and number of black people. And let's run the tool. So let's open up the table and see what came across. Here we go. New England states, white and black populations, and population in 2014. Very cool. So we're going to pause there. Let me close the table. And this is step 20. And this is a time, if you want to go back and explore this, to pause the video and start working through the steps again. Okay, now let's move on to the next section, selecting by location, steps 21 through 30. Okay, so back to our map project. Be sure you save. We didn't do that before we closed last time. So now we're going to be looking at the Select by Location tool, and it's the next one in the lineup here in the selection group under the Map tab. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to search for counties that intersect rivers. So to clean this up, let's just turn off our cities layer. So we're in the list by drawing order tab, and I'm going to turn this off. And a point I want to make is we control the visibility of our layers in this area. But if we go over here to the list by selection, which is where we're going next, these check marks only turn off and on the ability to select these layers. It doesn't turn on the visibility. So just be clear on that distinction. All right, so now we need to open up our Select by Location tool. The book has us do it up here through the Map tab. So if you click on that, it brings up this window. What I don't like about this is that it obscures my map. And if I don't have a lot of room on my monitor, I can't really put it anywhere that doesn't block other things. So I'm not going to do it this way. Feel free to do it whatever works for you. I'm going to do this through the geoprocessing pane over here on the right. So I'm just going back to where we search for tools. We're going to type in select by location, select layer by location. So that puts it up here in this pane. It doesn't block anything. Okay, so let's enter our search parameters. Our input feature is going to be counties. So what this means is this is a feature that we're doing our selection in. Whatever selection comes back will be pulled from whatever we put here. So counties. So this is gonna give us our relationship. Intersect is the correct relationship. If we click this drop down, there's all kinds of different choices, which we'll play with a few of those. And our selecting features, rivers. So let's run. And there we go. 889 counties have been selected. This looks correct to me. Everything here is underneath the river. So we're going to do a second pretty simple selection. Now we want to find the state capitals that are in the counties that intersect with state capitals. So we're going to leave our selection as it is. Counties is correct, but this time we're changing our relationship to contains and changing our selecting features from rivers to capitals. Run. Okay, so this wiped out the old selection and gave us a new one. And the reason why this happened is because our selection type was new selection. If we click on this, we were just playing around with something that looks like this in the last section. Had we changed it to something like add to the current selection, it wouldn't have wiped out the old one, it would have just added to it. So be very aware of this. Think about this as you're doing your homework, because you need to understand it. So what we're going to do is we're going to save these counties that intersect capitals as their own layer. And we can do that from this window, from our list by selection, because we can access all our layers. So you're going to right click on the counties layer here. Go up to selection. Make a layer from selected features. Now note that we're making a layer, we're not making a feature class. So we're not generating new data, it's just pulling out the selection and making its own layer that refers back to the same data in the database. And it happens real quick, here it is, county selection. Now if we go over back to our list by drawing order, here's our county selection. And we're going to rename this counties with capitals. So I double click on that flow twice. Capitals. This was step 22 in our book. So we've created this new layer, and just to prove that this is a separate layer, you can't really tell, they look alike. I'm going to turn off the original counties layer, and if we zoom in to one of these, I'll just zoom like this. There you can see that's a county that intersects a capital. Let's turn counties back on. So now we're going to do another example. We're going to look for cities that are within a certain distance of interstates. So let's change our visibility. Let's turn on cities and interstates. And for now, let's just turn off counties with capitals, since that's kind of distracting. We can leave the rest as it is. So come back to our select by layer location. We're going to change this to cities. Our relationship is now going to be within a distance. Within a distance. To interstates, and then our search distance is 20 miles. Change your default setting from meters to miles, and run. So one of the points we want to make here is that we first did a selection on the counties layer, and we left that layer still, or that selection still turned on. We did a selection with the cities, and those two were not, they didn't interfere with each other. So we were selected from one layer and then the other. And we can prove that. Here we have selected features are 3,741. If we go into the counties layer, we want to go to the original counties layer because that's where our selection is. And we're going to open up that attribute table. And we have 50 selected here. And we'll close that table, and we go up to the cities, open up that attribute table. Let's switch this to show selected features. We have 3,641 cities that are within 20 miles of an interstate. Let's close that. And so the math works out. All right, so now we're going to do something a little different. We're going to essentially do a selection of a selection. So let's clean things up. We're going to clear all of these selections. So there's one way you can do it. You can right-click on whichever layer you want to change, go to selection and clear selection. That just clears the counties of the selection we had there. That's one layer at a time, or you can just clean the slate and do everything. Come up here in your map tab and clear, and that clears everything. So we're going to look at the rivers that intersect Texas. So let's clean this up, turn off cities and turn off interstates. We can leave capitals on for now. And let's move over in the contents pane to display our list by selection. And we want to turn all of these off so that the only selectable layer is states. And if you remember how to do that, press your control key and any of the checkboxes and it clears everything. Let's go back here and just turn on states as the only selectable layer. We want to work with Texas, so let's make that a selection. We want to pick your select with a rectangle. Since we know it's Texas and it's pretty easy, it's much easier than using the tool. Now we're going to go back to our select layer by location tool. and we're going to, our input feature is rivers. And we're going to be selecting the states layer. So we're telling it our states. And then our relationship is going to be intersect. Intersect. Run. So let's just take a look and see what this looks like in the attribute table. And so we can access the attribute table from this view, although we can't turn off the visibility, off or on. So I right click on that, open the attribute table, and let's see, turn off states. That's not what I wanted. I wanted rivers. Here where we have 5 rivers selected. So these are our rivers. I just viewed that by the selected records. Okay, so that was just an example of doing selections from one layer to another, from one feature class to another. It is also possible to do a select by location within the same feature class. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to find all of the cities that are within 400 miles of Kansas City. So the first thing we need to do is clean up our map. So I'm clear your selection. We're done with that one. Let's turn off capitals. Let's turn on cities, and let's turn off rivers. So first thing we need to do is let's select our first city. So let's revisit the tool we used last section, select by attributes. I'm just going to click on that and let it obscure my map. So our input is cities. It's going to be a new selection, and we want to create an expression. Name is equal to Kansas City. I'm going to hit OK. Right? So here we are with our first selection. Now we're going to go into the Select by Location tool, and we're going to set our input features to cities, which it already is here, and we're going to do within a distance of our selecting features, which is also cities. And our distance is 400 miles. And this is going to be a new selection. Run. And there we go. All of the cities that are within 400 miles of Kansas City. So now let's do something a little different. Let's do some sequential selections. That's a pretty powerful tool. We want to look at rivers that run through mountain states. So let's prepare to do that by cleaning up. Clear the selection. Let's change our layers that we're looking at. So turn off cities and turn on rivers. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select our mountain states, and we're going to export that as its own feature class. Unlike last time, what we just did, where we exported our selection as just a layer. So we're going to create a feature class from that selection, and then we're going to select the rivers and a few different ways how it interacts with that mountain region. So let's start by pulling up our Make Feature tool. I'm going to do that through the geoprocessing pane. I'm just going to go back. I've been using these tools a lot, so I want here this one, Make Feature Layer, which is in my list. If it's not in your list, if you're accessing it this way, just go up here to Find Tools and type in Make Feature Layer, and it will come up. So for input features, states. And then the output layer is going to be mountain states. Mountain states. And with this tool, we can build in our own selection. So we're looking for subregions here is equal to mountain. And we're going to leave all of this other, these other selections the same. Run that tool. And just to convince ourselves it worked, let's turn off the counties layer. I'm sorry, the states layer. And it worked. And there's our selection. So now we're going to look at rivers and see how rivers interact with this. So let's pull up our select by location tool. You can either open it through the menu bar or do what I'm going to do, which is to go back, select layer by location. I'm pulling it from my geoprocessing pane. So our input layer is rivers. That means that's the layer that we're pulling the selection from. The relationship is intersect, that's correct. And then our selecting feature are mountain states. And we're going to run. And there we go. So what this is giving us is any river that has crossed the mountain states, no matter how much of the map it's on. So let's look at a different kind of relationship. Let's rerun this tool and just change our relationship to within. Within, just within by itself, and run. Right, so this is a much stricter criteria. We only have 2 rivers, so that means that every part of this river has to be contained within this other selection. So with this kind of selection, we're restricted to these relationships that we see here. We can't pull out rivers that are just within these states. So let's look at how we would do that. We actually have to use the clip tool for that. So let's clear our selection. And let's go back and find our clip tool. We'll type it in here. Oops. Clip. So for this, our input features are rivers. Our clip feature is mountain states. And I'm not going to accept this default output. I'm going to rename this something I want. I'm going to call it mountain rivers. And this is going to get saved to my geodatabase. So let's see what this looks like. It looks the same until we turn off rivers. And here we've actually clipped the boundaries of all of these rivers to our feature to mountain states. Okay, so this brings us to the end of step 30. Be sure you have saved this before you close it or do anything else. And now's the time to pause, and if you'd like to go back and rework the steps, make sure you understand everything. Okay, so now we're ready to move on to the next part. We're combining queries. So in the first part of this tutorial, we were doing the attributes, select by attributes. And then in the second part, we were with geographic, select by location. Now we're going to combine both. Okay, so this is where we left off before. Be sure to save this before we go on. And now we're going to shift gears. So we're going to look at combining the sorts of queries that we've done so far. First, we started with doing the select by attribute, so an attribute query. And then the last section we did location queries. So now we're going to do both. attribute and location. So let's start a new map. Clean this up just a little bit, probably doesn't matter, but I'm going to turn off my states and my mountain rivers that I just created, and I'm going to turn states back on. So let's create a new map. So go to Insert, New Map. And let's rename this Hazards. So I'm slow clicking on this on map twice. I'm going to type hazards and return. Now we need to get some of our layers in here. We're going to take some layers from the USA map. So click over back on the USA map. And we want states, counties, and cities. So I'm going to click on cities, and then I'm going to hit Control and do states and counties. Make sure you bring the right ones over. I'm going to right click and do copy. Go over back to hazards. I'm going to right click on hazards and paste. And so we're going to be looking at volcanoes and earthquakes. So let's go back to catalog. We're going to bring those layers in from the USA database. And here it is. It's in, I have it in my folders connection under USA, and then this USA data. So here we have volcanoes. I'm going to drag that in. And then quake history. That's coming in too. Okay, the book doesn't say to do this, but let's go back to the map tab and select our USA bookmark. So you can zoom into the 48. So now what we're going to do, we're going to create some new features, some new feature classes pulling from this. We want to focus on the most damaging earthquakes and the active volcanoes. So we're going to start by pulling up our Make Feature tool. And so let's switch over to the geodatabase, or the geoprocessing tool. And let's go back and find our Make Feature layer tool. So I'm going to hit the back button. I'm going to go back one more. No, I'm not. Okay, so I'm going to just search on here. Make feature layer. All right, so this is step 32 that we're on. And we're going to, our input feature is volcanoes. It's spelled wrong, I just noticed. And our output layer is active volcanoes. And here we're going to screen out what we're going to bring over to the new layer. Known eruption is greater than 0. 1. All right, so let's see how that looks. Let me turn off the old. All right, so there's our active volcanoes, and there's the entire data set. Now we're going to make another feature of the earthquakes. So I'm just going to hit the back button and reopen this tool, and that clears it. Our new input is going to be quake history. Output layer is damaging quakes. And then our little filter tool here for only bringing across the data that we want. We're going to build an expression. Magnitude is greater than 7. Then we're going to build with this. Up to now, we've been doing simple selections. We haven't been stacking a lot of clauses. So we're going to add one in this case. So add a clause, and we're going to change the logic here. We want to include, instead of and, it's going to be or. MMI is greater than or equal to 8. And you have to think about what this logic means here. If we had put an and here, it means that the data would have had to have matched both criteria. So the magnitude would have been greater than 7 and the MMI greater than or equal to 8. Now, because we're using or, that means that either condition is will satisfy this. So let's go ahead and run this tool. And let's see what this looks like. I'm going to turn off volcanoes. Here's our damaging quakes. Here's our original quake layer. Okay, so turn this back on. Okay, so we're done with our original layers. So we're going to remove them. I'm right clicking and I'm hitting remove. And then for volcanoes, the same thing, remove. Let's save this. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to figure out how many large cities lie within 50 miles of either either of these features that we've selected. So either a damaging quake or an active volcano. So back to the geoprocessing pane. We want to use select layer by location now. So now we're doing a spatial query based on the selection we just did. So we want to turn on cities. Let's turn that on. Cities. And we want to select them within distance, but not just any distance, but a geodesic distance. That's because we're covering such a large area. We're going to do active volcanoes. So let's just run this tool up within 50 miles. 50 miles, run. So now that has given us a selection. So now this has given us cities just within the distance of volcanoes. We also want to know earthquakes, and we want to know cities that are within 50 miles of either one. So in this case, when we build on this query, this is going to be an or, because an or will give us both conditions. If we made it an and, that would mean it would have to be, the city would have to be within 50 miles of both an earthquake and a volcano, together. So we're going to keep this selection active, and now we're going to alter this a little bit. So we're still using cities, and within a geodesic distance is correct. But now what we want to do is change this to damaging quakes, and we need to change our selection type. So if we left this as new selection, it would erase the old selection we had, and we would only get cities within 50 miles of the earthquake. So this has to be changed to add to current selection. Again, make sure you understand this. This is something you will need for your homework. So let's run this. Okay, this looks good. So now that's really increased our number of selected cities. So now that we have our selection, we want to turn this into its own layer. We want to pull this out so it's not in the cities. So let's go to cities and right click on that. And we're going to go to selection and make a layer from selected features. And we're going to name this risky cities. For some reason, I have two selections here, but we're not going to worry about that. Just confirm that. Yeah, that looks right. So these are my risky cities. And if I turn cities back on where our selection is, I'm toggling it back and forth and it looks good. Okay, so let's turn off cities. And this is the end of step 35. Let's save. Now the book at this point asks to use the summary statistics tool to determine the total number of people in risky cities. So that's a really good thing to know how to do, and this is going to be helpful in your exercises homework. So let's go look for the summary statistics tool. We have used this before. Our input table is risky cities. Let's do, so we want to know total number of people in risky cities. So we'll do risky cities population. And let's, I know there's a couple different years in there, so let's do 2014. Now, this part isn't in the book, but I wanted to walk through this so you have a chance to practice. So for field, let's do 2014 and all kinds of different statistics here, but we'll do summary. And you can, just for your own information, let's say you could do average, you could do the mean, min, max. It's a bit of a, kind of like going to the buffet. Sometimes you can really add a lot of things to your table, maybe that you don't necessarily need. And the only risk to that is it just gets confusing to interpret. But we're going to keep this simple. So let's go ahead and export this table. And here it is. It's a standalone table. And let's open up the attribute table. And so here's my sum population in 2014 for our risky cities. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing, but for counties. So let's turn off risky cities. And we're going to go back to our geoprocessing. And we're going to look for, again, select layer by location. This time our input feature is counties. And the relationship we want is within a distance. We're going to go for a geodesic distance. Now, you could go with distance. It probably wouldn't make a lot of difference, but it's just better because this is over such a large area to go geodesic. So our first selecting feature is going to be active volcanoes, the layer that we already did, and it's going to be 50 miles. We're just using the same criteria as before. I did have my counties on. So that looks about right for volcanoes. I'll take out, yeah, see, that looks good. So now we've already got this selected. So this tool will act on this selection, and we're going to include add earthquakes, damaging quakes, 50 miles. Now make sure you change the selection type. If you don't, it'll not be pretty. So I'm going to add to current selection and run. There. I say that looks pretty good. So what we're going to do is the same thing as before. We're going to export this layer. It should start to feel pretty familiar. We're going to symbology selection, make a layer. Here's our county selection. I turn off counties just to, yeah, that looks pretty good. So we're going to name this risky counties. Okay, hit return. And oh, I don't see this anywhere in the instructions, but let's clear the selection. Again, yeah, that looks good. Okay, so that was up through step 37. Let's save. Let's look at this a little bit different way. What we've done, let's turn off counties. What we've done is we've selected any county that is within 50 miles of one of these hazards. So you can see there's like a lot of space out here that really isn't very close at all to an earthquake or a volcano. So we're going to do this actually a better way. We're going to look at buffering and clipping. That's a little more realistic as far as distances go. And these are this buffering is a new tool that we haven't looked at yet. So in order to buffer and clip, what we're going to have to do is somehow get the quakes and the volcanoes together in the same layer, because you can't do this on multiple layers at one time. So the first thing we're going to have to do is merge these 2 point layers. So back to the geoprocessing pane. I'm going to type merge. This is actually an easy tool to find in the analysis pane, but we're set up for this. So here's merge. So we're going to put in our 2 data sets. Our first one is damaging quakes. And our next one is active volcanoes. And our output data set will be dangers. And there's a lot of other parameters we can change in here. Again, we could do essentially a query, but we're going to export everything that goes with this data together. So we can do this merge because it's 2 point feature classes. And here's our dangers. So just to convince ourselves this is correct, I'm going to turn off the top layer, right? And if you toggle that, you can see that it overlays perfectly. So let's turn off these other 2 layers and leave dangers on. So now we're going to buffer. So we're going to create a 50-mile buffer around each of these points. And for that, we're going to use the buffer tool. Buffer. So our input feature class is dangers. We're going to call this dangers buffer. Again, we're going to go with 50 miles. And we'll just, we'll keep the distance in miles. And for linear unit, yeah, we just want linear unit. As far as method goes, we're okay with planar method here since it's a good projection. Equidistance should already preserve the shape. And then we want to change dissolve type. We want to dissolve all output features into a single feature. This is also in your book. This is figure 9.25 if you want to refer to it later. And let's run the tool. And there it looks pretty good. Let's zoom in. It's kind of interesting to look at. So this looks pretty good. I think this buffer is pretty representative of the area near these features, much more so than just our counties. Let me go back, I'm going to go back to the bookmark. So the last thing we have to do is we're going to clip this risky counties layer to this bucket. So let's go back to our geoprocessing and let's look for the clip tool. And our input feature. Risky counties here. Our clip feature is going to be our dangers buffer. We're going to name this risky clip. Run the tool. It takes a little while to run, so don't be surprised. This is when we're getting into geoprocessing larger and more complicated sets. So things are taking a little longer. So let's turn off our risky counties and the dangers buffer. Zoom into this. So it looks actually really good. Let's also turn off dangers. And so now the last thing we need to do is symbolize. So we're going to symbolize this on a graduated color scale and based on population. So we're representing the populations that are at risk to these dangers. So I just double clicked on the symbol for risky clip. And I'm going to go back to primary symbology and select graduated color. And then for that, we're going to symbolize on, yes, population 2014 per square mile. So this is a normalized. Now, this is natural breaks, and this is the default setting. And I really want to emphasize not to automatically accept the default setting. And hopefully someday they will change so that natural breaks is not the default for graduated symbols because our graduated colors, because we never like that. So I'm going to switch this to a geographic interval. Yeah, so that definitely looks a lot better. And I think I'm going to go with a little scarier looking colors. So the darker it is, the worse the danger. So when you symbolize your own map, play around with the different colors, pick something that looks really good. And before you do anything else, save your work. And the other thing I would want to point out, just so you're aware as you're making your maps, if you look at these labels, the default setting is 6 decimals. So again, this is the default setting and it isn't something you want to accept just outright. You really want to think about this. So let's change our label. And the way we do that is go over here to advanced symbology options, format labels, decimal places. This is the culprit. We're representing population per square mile. So these are people per square mile. So what we're going to go with 0. We want to round this up so the numbers are even. So when you display your legend and we're looking at these labels, at least you won't get in trouble for having a 1/10 of a person on your map. Okay, so we're at the end of the section. We just finished set number 41. Take a minute if you need to and explore and go through the steps again and make sure you understand everything. So we're back for a few more sections. I'm going to combine 2 sections, definition queries and exporting data, really go together and they're both pretty short. So let's do them all in one shot. So we'll do 42 through 47. Okay, so here is where we left off on the last section. We're going to shift gears. We're going to talk about how we save layers and export data. So let's get off of this map. We're going to leave hazards and we're going to look at USA map a little bit. So we've got the cities layer in here, and we also have capitals. And so capitals is essentially a subset of cities. Let's open up the cities attribute table. This will help us understand when we talk about how capitals came to be. So here's all of our cities. And if you toggle over, we've got this, this column here. And I've got this organized so that it's sorted by state. And if you go down, at some point it becomes essentially, these are null values. So what this is doing is it's indicating which of these cities are states. So let's close that. And now let's open up capitals. So here we go. If you toggle down, it's displaying those cities, and it's all the same data, and it's the ones that are indicated as a state capital. So now let's open up the properties. So I'm right-clicking on this, go down to properties, and we're going to go to source. And let's look at where this data is stored and what it's really called. So the feature class is cities. So it's actually not its own feature class called capitals. This is just the label of this layer has been changed. It really refers to this layer, cities. And it's stored in the USA database. You might recall we brought this over. I think we brought this over. We have brought it over before. And so the way this has come about is if you come down here to definition query, this has actually been defined as everything in that one column we looked at that has been designated state. If there's any other word in there, there's one that said national, and then there was a whole bunch of null values. So those are not displayed in this layer. So if, cancel out of this, and let's turn off cities. If we were to go into the cities attribute table and make changes, it would be the same as what we see in capitals. Capitals is actually referring to the exact same table. So they're essentially the same thing, just displayed twice. So let's say we want to transfer this into a layer that we can use somewhere else. So we're not actually creating a feature class. What we're going to do here is we're going to go down to sharing, and we're going to share this as a layer file. And so this is going to my United States. I made a copy of this and I call it United States tutorial. Now you probably, it's fine for you to save it to your United States folder. We're going to change the name to US capitals. So this is a layer file. It's a .lyrx. So let's save that. And now let's go to our files, and here it is. So that was the United States underscore tutorial in mine, and yours is probably United States. And let's go over to the hazards and drag this in here so we can take a look at it. And let's turn off our risky clip. So this has brought the symbology across. And if we look at the properties, go to source, here it is, it's still cities, and it's still the original data file in the same place. So this saves space. If you don't need to generate a new feature class, it's a way to save on your storage. It's also a way that you can keep your data in all one place. So if you update it in your original attribute table, it's reflected on everything. So it makes your work easier. You don't have to worry about getting multiple different copies of the same thing. So that was step 43, and that is the end of the definition query section. Now we're going to switch to exporting data. So let's save our project. And to demo this, we're going to create a new map. So we're going to insert, new map. And we're going to rename this lower 48. So I'm clicking on this twice slowly. And let's import our US capitals layer file that we just created. So now we're going to talk about a way of creating new feature classes. Before, we were only working with layers that referred to the same database, the same attribute table. Now we're going to generate new feature classes. So here we have all the capitals, and this includes Hawaii and Alaska, and it's quite a large area. And as you can see, it's a bit awkward. We've got capitals from Hawaii and Alaska in here also. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some feature classes that only exist in the lower 48. So let's check one thing first. We want to make sure that capitals is selectable. Yeah. So capitals is now selectable. Now we're going to select the lower 48. So this is something you know very well by now. We're going to select by rectangle. We're going to draw a rectangle around the lower 48 capitals. And now we're going to export this into its own feature class. And the way we do that, we're going to right click on capitals, go down to data, and export features. We're going to call this L48 capitals. And it's going where we want it to go, to our United States geodatabase. And we'll make a couple more. So let's expand. I'm working from folders. Let's expand this. Let's see. Let's expand the USA database and bring across counties and states. These are all selectable. So let's do the same for these. Make sure we're on select. So we have 49 states selected and over 3,000 counties. So we're going to export both of these as their own feature classes. It's going to be lower 48 states. And for counties, data, export features, lower 48 counties. So just make sure you know which databases or which databases is going to. It's in my United States, and you might get a little nervous because I'm going to see capitals, but we need to refresh when we create new feature classes. So go down to refresh, and here they are. So let's go over to our list by drawing and take out the original counties, remove, and the original states and capitals. And let's clear our selections. So here we go. If we zoom out, you can see Alaska and Hawaii are no longer included in here. Okay, so here we are going to pause again. If you want to practice these different techniques, go ahead and do that now, and we'll finish up next. This brings us to the end of the tutorial walkthrough. You are going to do the remaining steps on your own, or at least I strongly recommend that you give it a try. The directions are not as specific, they're not as step-by-step, but if you've done the rest of the tutorial carefully, this will be really good practice for applying the information that you've learned and pulling it together. And in general, it will also help you with the exercises. The whole reason we do the tutorial is to give you the tools and a lot of guidance. So when you get to the exercises, you can apply all of these things. So give it a try, and I hope this tutorial was helpful.